welcome to the Kotlin Talent and Salary Report live stream. I'm going to give it a few minutes before digging into it and sort of delving into everything, because I'm sure everyone will just take the time to join in. Appreciate it. It's Tuesday morning, probably lots going on. But feel free to pop in the comments where you're watching from, where you're tuning in from, what your role is, if you're a Kotlin developer yourself, or maybe a Java developer keen to get into Kotlin, hiring manager interested to hear more about the market. Feel free to pop where you're watching from. I guess I'll give a bit of an introduction to myself while everyone does tune in. So my name is Kirsty, and I am a Java and Kotlin recruitment consultant. So I've been working in this market for over a year and a half now, day in, day out, recruiting solely Java and Kotlin developers. So know the market pretty well. We have a variety of teams. So I don't know if any of you have watched any of the previous lives so far. So I think it was the week before last week, Charlotte, who heads up the Java and Kotlin team, she did a talk through of the Java report. And so today I'm doing the Kotlin one. We've also had, I think already Anna has done the AI and machine learning one. So Anna heads up that team. Obviously major market AI. I think later this week we've got the Golang one, we've got Rust, front-end JavaScript, we've got all sorts of reports coming out. So there'll be, I'm sure there'll be links to those, and also links to follow the Understanding Recruitment page, so you can get all the rest of the links over the next coming weeks. So yeah, I think that's probably it to introduce myself, and I'm sure most people who are ready to, are kind of keen to hear, will be joining by now. For those of you who didn't hear, feel free to pop in the comments kind of where you're watching from, your role, if you're a Kotlin developer, Java developer, hiring manager, whatever it may be. So yeah, to start off with then. So this is a talk through of the talent and salary report created specifically for the Kotlin market. So a bit of background to where this market, this report has come from. As I'm sure everyone is aware, 2023 was a really interesting, pretty turbulent time, particularly for the tech market. So over the course of the whole year, we have generated this report by speaking to the likes of CTOs, heads of engineering, heads of talent, and of course software developers, to really understand their desires when it comes to a job search, what they're passionate about, what makes them tick, what's important, tech trends, typical salary guides, all sorts of things. So I'm going to be talking through all of those in here. So yeah, started with, as I mentioned, 2023 was a really tough year for many. It kind of started off with the beginning of the year was filled with redundancies, particularly across some of the bigger companies like Meta, Amazon, Apple, Google, all those big, the FAANG companies. And this is sort of throughout the year, things should change. The redundancy started at the beginning of the year, was filled with, it was a massive impact. And then so just scrolling down to kind of the rest of the year, towards the end of the year, there was a change to, it wasn't necessarily that people were being laid off, but another cause for a lot of people's job moves was the return to office policy. So a lot of companies throughout COVID, they shifted their policy to be fully remote, understandably, but then they realized that a couple years on, things are different, and having that in-office presence can have such a benefit, not only to the employees themselves and the culture that it generates in a company, but also the effect it has on the work. It can improve the yield of work so much just from having that face-to-face collaboration is so nice. And this has naturally received some mixed reactions from engineers. So some were more than happy about this part of things, but others, they got used to the fully remote aspect of working. They really appreciate the flexibility, whether that be to family commitments or just that's the way they work better. And unfortunately, some people then did decide to leave their companies for that reason. A bit about here at the bottom, just about a lot of sort of sectors that spurred people to maybe move jobs, or if they were moving jobs anyway, that interested them, was kind of going into that tech for good sector. So whether that be green tech or clean tech, so more in the sort of energy, sustainability, or maybe health tech. We work with a number of companies. I was actually last year was probably where we worked with the most companies in this sector, because so many people have realised that what's really important to them and what is being able to do a job that's fulfilling. So not only enjoying kind of the technical aspect and having interesting technical challenges that they're working on, but also knowing that what they're doing is making an impact for the better, and it's having a positive impact on so many people out there in the real world, really. So yeah, that's that. And back to the top there, there's just a bit more about back up to the top of that page. I think there's a little bit more about sort of the tech trends of this year. So as I mentioned, being a pretty difficult year, a lot of the salary, a big topic we have noticed that we discussed with many people was the salary aspect. So throughout, I guess, in the post-COVID era, the market was absolutely booming. 2021, 2022, people were moving jobs left, right, and centre. They were seeing massive sort of improvements and sort of increases in their salary in a job move, typically around the sort of 10 to 15% mark, sometimes even more. But last year, this had completely sort of that upwards graph that we did notice has sort of really plateaued out. And typically in a job move, we were looking more at the sort of 0 to 5% increase in a job move. So whereas back in 2021, you could have been seeing someone with 2 years experience getting 75, 80K as a software engineering role. That's just not happening now. It's a different market. It's not to say we won't get back there. It would be amazing if we would get back there. Perhaps towards the end of this year, that might be the case again, but right now, that's not the case. But yeah, there was a lot of, I think, this over 2023, a massive emergence of, not necessarily from the very beginning, new technologies, but emerging technologies have grown so much. So Kotlin, of course, being one of them. Kotlin's been around for quite some time now, but only in the sort of recent years is it becoming bigger and bigger. So a lot of people moving from Java to Kotlin, dabbling in it, whether that be in personal projects or in their professional environment. Also, two other big languages, Rust and Golang, have massively grown, especially Rust in sort of the blockchain Solidity area. It kind of ties in it very nicely. And I guess alongside that, a lot of typical technologies that go hand in hand with them. People using public cloud technologies, whether that be AWS, GCP, Azure. A lot of hiring, a lot of employers do look for people with cloud experience, and sometimes also front end, like full stack role, front end experience too. And one of the most typical combinations of a front end sort of back end combination with Kotlin is having TypeScript and React on the front end. So that's a bit about the general sort of technologies that we kind of saw growing throughout 2023. A couple of the top topics that were discussed sort of when I was speaking to hiring managers about kind of their biggest struggles throughout the year and what was taking up the most of their stress and worries were, of course, things like cash flow being a really big one. But another thing that was very nice, pleasant to hear, was sort of the importance of ED&I for so many companies to really ensure not only are they actually sort of diversifying their workforce, but making sure that they're attracting a more diverse workforce. So putting in place various measures that are going to ensure that someone feels that they're going to be welcome at that company, and there's the right measures in place to make them feel accepted. For example, if it's a woman, having various flexible working measures in place. For example, if they had to do school pickups, things like that. And so going into some of the factors, I think I touched on this briefly, but factors in influencing software engineers to move jobs. A big one is always going to be the learning and growth opportunities in the tech sector. People are naturally have a growth mindset, which is amazing. And I think the reason so many of these people are in these software engineering jobs is because they love learning, they love working on interesting challenges where they're really tested and they have to think and find new solutions. And if they've been at a company for 2-3 years and they feel like they've learned everything they can, they've got it all out of it, but they're no longer being stretched, that's their natural time to move, which is always a nice reason to hear. And also another reason is kind of the people wanting to get into a new sector. So like I mentioned earlier, whether that be getting into sort of green tech, doing something that's having a positive impact, or another one, huge the market is, of course, AI, machine learning. With the emergence of ChatGPT, AI has just absolutely skyrocketed. Everyone wants a piece of the pie. Everyone wants to be involved in it. Naturally, it's so cool. It's so exciting. Everyone's like so intrigued to see where it's going to take us. They'd love to be involved in that. Of course, the hybrid working as well, being a part of that. As I mentioned, people wanting to make sure that their work-life balance it's such an important thing for them to make sure that their work policy does match that and support that. And then actually financial considerations is always going to be something that people do take into consideration, especially with sort of the economic situation we went through last year. It always played a big part. Throughout the year, we have worked in pretty much any industry and anywhere around the world. So Kotlin is growing massively. It's not just local to London, for example. We've helped scale companies across the board, like I mentioned, like it says there at the top, across all industries, from green tech, fintech, health tech, and then around the world, from around all of Europe, but even outside of that, Australia, Egypt, so a whole range of countries there. So just going down to the next page. This is a bit more of a specific breakdown of where about the Kotlin market and the talent where it's located. So, and also about the diversity split. So I think it's no surprise that technology and STEM subjects in general has always been a sector where women in particular are severely underrepresented. And so unfortunately the ratios we see here are still way too low, way lower than they should be. But if I just scroll down, it's really nice to see that actually in the States, this ratio is ever so slightly different. So hopefully with America leading the way, we will follow, and eventually these ratios are going to level out, and there will be more women involved in the tech world. But of course, that's not something we can just change over day. It's a whole process that needs to be done that starts at the beginning, from sort of school level, but like I mentioned, also having companies that really are on board with embracing diversity and making sure they put in place their own measures to make sure that a female, for example, feels welcome in a company. So just moving on to a bit more specifics around the location. So of course, around the UK, London has always been such a massive tech hub, so definitely holds the most sort of Kotlin engineers and Kotlin professionals. Manchester sort of following behind that. Edinburgh, Leeds, Bristol are some of the biggest cities. Of course, that's not to say the only places. And then around Europe, again, London leads the way, being, like I mentioned, such a huge tech hub, not just in the UK, but around Europe. But we've got sort of across Germany, Amsterdam, obviously Berlin and Munich, both having being in the top 5. And then also in Eastern Europe, we have noticed is where a lot of the talent also resides. So like Ukraine, Romania, Poland are some of the top 3 Eastern European countries. And then in these States, the kind of top 3 are, I think it's San Fran, Seattle, and New York are the top 3 sort of cities for holding Kotlin developers over in the States. And moving on to top employees. So this one, I guess, is not necessarily a huge surprise. Naturally, being some of the biggest companies, they are going to hire the most developers. So You've got some of, like I mentioned earlier, the top FANG companies. We've got Meta, Google in there, Amazon, Chase, of course. So a lot of the, as I'm sure a lot of you know, all of the big banks like Chase, Morgan Stanley, Deutsche, Goldman Sachs, everything was built on Java, and Java is very closely related to Kotlin. So a lot of sort of Kotlin engineers will have a background in Java. But also what we're noticing, for example, I know in Amex, American Express, they were originally a massive Java house, but recently, over the past couple of years, they have shifted, or sort of all of their new projects they're building in Kotlin or migrating over to Kotlin. So a lot of companies are deciding to just migrate over or build new projects in Kotlin, because it is, from when I have discussions with Kotlin developers, one way that they describe Kotlin is, if Java were to be written or created now, Kotlin is how it would be written. So basically, it's very similar, but it's a lot more efficient and easier and simpler than Kotlin. So when you've got sort of, obviously Java's never going to disappear. You can't sort of change everything that all the banks are written on, such a massive system. But when you're creating new projects, it is easier to, when you can, make life easier for yourself, so make it with a slightly faster software. In Kotlin, it's fairly similar. Again, you've got Google there, a couple of big consultancies like Capgemini, EPAM. Also, naturally, it would be shocking if we didn't see JetBrains. And just for those of you who don't know, JetBrains that is the company that created Kotlin. It was actually created by Andrei Breslav, who actually met myself. I think it was back in November. I went to a Kotlin event, which was amazing. We heard him speak. And as someone myself who I'm not the most technical, I hire software engineers, but I can't code myself. He did a talk all about his journey creating a programming language, which was so interesting. Like I say, as someone not technical, I found it really interesting, really sort of made me think like, oh my goodness, that's a lot. It takes a lot to create a programming language. But yeah, he worked at JetBrains at the time. And then moving down to the States, it's quite similar again. You've got a lot of the big companies, Amazon, AWS as well, Google, Meta yet again, and Microsoft too. Here is just a little statistic about from when we created this report, we also sent out a survey to all of the Java and Kotlin developers in our network to find out about their preferences, and there'll be a few more polls I'll talk through at the bottom at the end of this. But this one is just almost 30% of Java and Kotlin engineers would be keen to use Kotlin professionally in the future. So they might already be working with Kotlin, or they might be looking to introduce it into their. So here we have a bit about the background where engineers come from. So I guess unsurprisingly, a lot, well, the top top 5 universities, I believe all 5 of them are actually Russell Group universities. So when we speak to hiring managers who are looking for a software engineer, obviously one of the first questions we'll ask is, what sort of background is important to you? Where would you like them to come from? Do they need a degree? Do they need a university background? Do they need this, that? And a lot of them are keen to see that kind of comp sci, computer science background from a top university. Obviously, everyone wants the best of the best as they see it. I think it's also really important to remember that not everyone comes from a university background, and it's not always necessary. I was speaking with someone fairly recently, and they were saying that what they actually like to see is, and they would love to see more from other employers, is people being open to the non-traditional university background route. So whether that be an apprenticeship or doing sort of various internships or joining sort of tech consultancies that train you up, and there are so many out there. And I think this is really important for a lot of employers to remember that university doesn't work for everyone, or it might have been something that at the time they never thought they needed or didn't want to do at the time, and then they've decided they really want to get into computer science, or they have a real flair for it, and they might be absolutely amazing, but so many employers are going to miss out on some amazing candidates out there purely because they're saying, oh, they must have a computer science degree from a top 10 university or whatever it may be. But actually, there are so many amazing people out there who didn't go down the traditional route, but are just as good, if not better. So I think it's really important to remember that, yes, of course, university can come in really handy, especially for like a graduate position, because they're going to, or if they've done computer science, they'll have a kind of very fresh understanding of all the core sort of computer science fundamentals. But at these train-up companies, they're going to get just the same sort of experience, and also a bit more practical, where they'll be doing coding experience right from the get-go. So there are definitely swings and roundabouts to both, like everything. Going down into Europe, you can see here, like I mentioned, that a lot of the top talent in Europe is from Eastern Europe. That's very evident in the universities they're coming from. So clearly they're from Poland. We've got, I think, 3 of these in Poland. We've got Krakow, Wrocław, Warsaw, and obviously Romania there as well. And then also in the States, I think most of these, I don't know all of them, but I think at least a couple of them are Ivy League universities. So again, you've got that same sort of top achiever background that engineers are coming from. And then just moving on to the next page. This sort of follows on nicely from that one. Again, having people from, typically they come from, I think the top one is of course computer science background as a degree, but anything surrounding that. So whether it's computer engineering, maths, even some of the other ones that aren't listed here, they're not maybe not in the top 5, but very common as well. You've got physics, chemistry, anything sort of STEM, so anything scientific, mathematical. They're all pretty much the same among the UK, Europe, and also the US as well. See that. So I think this is probably one of the most exciting parts of the report that I know so many people have been keen to hear about, is the salary guide. So these, if I just go down onto that, this bit I think is what a lot of people were keen to hear about, maybe whether that be because you're a software engineer yourself and are kind of keen to hear if you're being paid in line with market standard, or if you're a software engineer and you're thinking, right, we've got this budget, just want to make sure that we are paying fairly, that's in line with market standards. So typically the kind of the entry level graduate position can be anywhere from sort of 30 to 40,000 pounds. Junior goes up to, if we're going to about 2 to 3 years experience, can go up to 60,000. Mid going up to about sort of 3 to 6 years experience. This can increase quite drastically up to 100,000. For the senior level, there's quite a big range here, because senior can, a lot of companies class senior as different levels. So we've said senior is typically about 6 years plus, and you could be saying anywhere from 80 to 120,000 pounds. And then, of course, as you take on more experience, take on more responsibilities, a more experienced engineer taking on sort of principal staff position of leadership can see anywhere up to 135,000 pounds. And then, of course, the manager, this role where I guess you've gone slightly maybe a bit more hands-off, not so involved in the technical side of things, more people management based, anywhere upwards of 120,000 pounds is typical here. For Europe, the salaries aren't too dissimilar. They're slightly lower, which is quite typical across Europe. In particular, if you look at the note at the bottom there, it says typically in Eastern Europe, salaries are lower than perhaps in Western Europe, but it's all relative. So their salaries are lower, but the cost of living is also lower. And then if you go to more sort of Scandinavia, Norway, Sweden, Finland, it is the other way around. Salaries are a lot higher, as is the cost of living there. I remember, little fun fact, my sister actually went there a few years ago, where she got engaged, and they said a bell pepper, just a vegetable, a single bell pepper cost £8. Clearly, that was not a common vegetable for them to eat there. But yeah, a lot of like the food and everything was so expensive out there. But obviously, the people living there, they're earning a lot more, so it is relative. And then if we go down to the States, salaries in comparison to Europe, salaries in the States are a lot higher. And what you'll notice in America, there's a lot more, salaries depend a lot more on sort of the funding, the rounds of funding that companies are receiving. So if I just scroll down, I think it mentions here at the bottom, its compensation is very shaped by the funding stage of the company. So it can vary drastically. For example, you're seeing up to sort of like $220,000 sorry, for a lead, which might seem huge. Again, it's relative. It's a very different country. It's a very different sort of state out there. So if we go down now, I think this is where getting to some really interesting statistics about that we from the polls and the sort of surveys that we did in order to create this report. So we really get these sort of first-hand opinions from developers themselves. So it's really great to hear that just shy of almost three quarters of engineers are happy with their pay. So whether they feel they're paid just like fairly or well, and you've got just under 30% feeling that they are perhaps underpaid, which is understandable. I think, as I mentioned, in the state of the market and the economic situation, some companies, unfortunately, as much as they wish to pay their employees more or sort of give those well-deserved pay rises, they just might have had to hold off an extra 6 months or a year or something. So hopefully we'll see that graph filling out to everyone feeling happy with their pay by the end of this year or by next year's report. Following on from the remuneration, pay isn't everything. Something that comes in massively to people's considerations when it comes to a job move or kind of feeling well remunerated is also in the benefits that they receive alongside the base package or the base salary. So here we've got a graph which shows the typical benefits that people do receive. So number one, I think everyone will always look for is that private healthcare. Medical insurance is really important to so many people. And then not two, shares are, but two of the, I'd say probably top benefits are also bonus or shares. So typically in a bigger, more established company, we'll see a bonus offered. And then on the flip side of that, in a sort of smaller or startup company, shares, equity, stocks is a lot more common as the other sort of financial benefit there. And other things that are important can be like training budget, if they get a budget for home office equipment, if that's obviously the way of working, if it's remote working, and bits like that. Another thing actually to mention is so I've recently been speaking with a lot of sort of, I guess, SME, sort of startup to mid-size companies, really wanting to make sure that they are making themselves as attractive and competitive in their market through their benefits package. And we were discussing kind of the top typical benefits. It was really interesting and refreshing to hear that they actually had some that definitely made them stand out amongst the others. So they obviously had all the usual ones that are listed here, but they also had some additional ones, which is very rare to see. So they had IVF leave, they had menstrual leave, menopausal leave, which are all really refreshing to hear and really highlight the understanding of diversity here. So what I touched on at the beginning, when it comes to companies wanting to make sure and doing everything they can to attract diverse workforce, this is exactly the type of thing that is necessary, and that's important because it shows that they understand that if we want to get more women working in technology, we need to make sure we're putting in place measures that are going to make them feel comfortable and that they can do their job as best as possible, but are supported throughout everything that they're going through. So it's really refreshing to hear that some companies are introducing benefits like these. And just moving down here. As I've spoken about earlier, the reason for job move can vary so much. And it's interesting, I think, here, when I first read this, I was a little surprised to see that the number one, or at least the majority here, is the salary and compensation. I did wonder perhaps it's because this survey was anonymous, so people feel like they can be probably honest. But what I've noticed myself, when speaking, obviously day in day out, I'm speaking to so many candidates and software engineers, and I've noticed that the number one is actually what's number two here, the challenging projects. The ability to learn, grow, be working with different technologies or sort of more modern ones, the latest versions of everything. This is what's so important to so many developers. So I'd say they're definitely the top two. And also culture as well plays a big part. So especially in younger, more junior engineers, you'll notice maybe in a much more senior engineer, they've been through it all, they've done everything, and right now they're like, okay, this is my job. I've done all the learning and all the participating. I'm now happy just to get on and do my job. But particularly for more junior engineers, from entry level up to sort of mid, what is really important for them is that social aspect and the culture and being part of something where they feel supported. Often someone working somewhere with a flat structure where they can contribute ideas and know that they're going to be listened to, and not necessarily shunned down just because they're not as senior as someone else. So that's another one which is really important. And just going down here, so here we have a few more of the polls and graphs that I spoke about a moment ago. So here you can see these particularly do circle around the hybrid and remote working topic, because as we all know, I think this will always be one of the biggest topics of discussion in not necessarily just the tech world, but in the whole world of working, especially after COVID, where we realised actually it is possible. So we actually have, we work with a lot of companies who support hybrid, remote working, all sorts of flexibility. So you can have a look on our website, I've got it linked there to all sorts of jobs. But yeah, here you can see the kind of importance that people place on that. So whether they are willing to accept roles that do offer flexible working. And then just scrolling down, we have a couple more. So here we can see that most people would actually, this was a confusing one when it didn't, but most are happy to still accept a role that doesn't offer, maybe it's like fully remote working, but that's because this is only one aspect of choosing a role. When speaking to candidates, there are so many aspects that come into play. It's never going to be just one thing, and it's always, maybe if they didn't have this, then that's fine. I'd then be looking for this instead, or a higher salary or a different benefit. It's all sort of balancing everything out and just making sure that they're overall happy with their offer. And then moving on, I think that might be, yeah. So this just gives a bit of background to the people we did speak to for this survey. So majority of so for about 3/4 of the pool were sort of fairly senior, so from 6 years experience plus. So we can definitely take from this that they are very experienced engineers in the market. They kind of have been in it a while. They know what they look for. They know what's important to them. And then we've got about quarter made up by sort of the less senior engineers. And just a couple more polls to finish off, more specifically about their use of Kotlin. So a lot of the people in this poll have been, obviously Java being so big, Java is always going to be, or at least at the moment, much bigger than Kotlin. So a lot of people haven't yet used Kotlin commercially. A lot will have been dabbling in it in their own free time, creating personal projects, putting uploads onto GitHub and stuff. But a lot are also keen to start using it. From the developers I speak to on the day-to-day, they're always, we work with a lot of companies who are who are sort of migrating their tech stack over to Kotlin, or if they're like a smaller startup company, they have actually built everything in Kotlin from the get-go. And one of the main things that I will recommend to these companies when they're hiring Kotlin engineers is the openness that's sort of necessary. So they don't necessarily have to have worked with Kotlin yet, because it's a relatively small language compared to others. But the thing that is necessary is sort of just having worked in a JVM background. So whether that be Java, Kotlin, or Scala, most companies are more than happy for you to come from a Java background, for example. But as long as you're willing and happy to work with Kotlin, that's great. And that is the case with most people. Almost everyone I speak to would love to work with Kotlin. So I think that is the end. So I've got my details here, and they'll also be linked up there. And then feel free to connect with me, and anyone, whether you're sort of a hiring manager and you would like more details about this, or sort of a more tailored response, I'd love to connect. So feel free to put me a message, connect with me, and I can actually send you over a hard copy of the report for you to have a read through yourself. But I'd be more than happy to have a discussion about answering any specific questions you might have about your experience in the market, whether it be more specific to kind of the market you're in, for example, fintech, or the size of your company, how you're finding things, any struggles you've gone through. I'd be more than happy to chat and discuss through. But for now, we will move on to the Q&A session. So I think there's been a few questions popped up throughout. So the first one: are the companies you work with keen on non-traditional entry-level candidates who don't possess a university degree? They show experience by building a strong portfolio project and a solid understanding of computer science topics. That's a really interesting one, Sebastian. I don't know if you heard the part I was saying a bit earlier about the background. So I'd say at the moment, we have a couple of entry-level positions, and the ones at the moment, our current clients are keen on that university background. But actually what I think is so important, and I know a lot of companies are trying to expand on and make sure that they are being more inclusive, is being more open to that background. So I think you've really put it well there. So I think the most important thing is to demonstrate that you are passionate, and you have you kind of demonstrated your passion for it by having a really strong portfolio. That's great to have. And I don't know if you have a GitHub profile, but I'll definitely recommend having one of those too, where you can kind of show that you're really active on there, on sort of creating lots of projects. So hey, thanks. Yeah, I'm always super happy to connect and sort of build out my network. So feel free to connect with me. All my details will be on the screen and on below this, I think. So you can connect with me. Feel free to reach out. We can discuss if there's anything in particular you're looking for, and to see if I have anything I can help you with if you're looking for a new role at the moment. Let's see if I've got any more questions. I think that might be it for now then. So yeah, like I said then, I hope that was helpful for everyone and found it interesting. Feel free to connect with me. My tab's there on the screen. I'd really love to connect with as many people. I'm always happy to have a discussion to see if there's anything I could do to help, even if it's just sort of talking about the market, answer any questions. As I said, I'm very sort of expert in my market. I've been working in this market for quite some time now. I speak to developers, heads of engineering, CTOs, heads of talent day in, day out. So if there's anything you'd like help with, I'm always here to help. Yeah, so if there's anyone else who would like a copy of the report, please do reach out as well, and I'd love to share it with you too. Thank you very much.